Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. It is time to wrap up another quarter. We have entered quarter 4 of the year, which is absolutely crazy. I do have a series of videos coming up in this season of the year. Every quarter I wrap up a couple of things, and today we're going to tackle all of the pans and all of the eyeshadows that I finished in the last 3 months. I will also have an update to my products on to pan this year, and I think also another empties and purchase video coming up later this month. But this is the first video in the kind of quarterly series that is kicking off the month. So I'm really excited to share with you the pans and the shadows that I finished. I am really happy with the progress from this past quarter, and more so on one of the two areas, but you'll see that when I go through the numbers. I will jump into the first eyeshadow, and I usually start off with the pans, so that's what I'm going to do today as well. But before I jump into that, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So like I said, we are starting off with the pans that I've hit in the last quarter, and as of like end of quarter 2, I had hit 24 pans so far this year. So we are starting off with the 25th pan of the year and the first one from the quarter, and that one comes from this palette right here. This is the shadow that I had in Pando's Eyeshadows, and that is the shade Peony, which is right down here, and this one took me 20 uses to pan on, and just for reference, all of the uses that I mentioned are only uses from this year and last year, because before that point I did not track like all my usage, but I am now tracking every single time I use any eyeshadows in my collection, whether they're in a project or not. So I believe I had like 1 or 2 uses from last year, and then the rest of them were in Pando's Eyeshadows, but again 20 uses tracked to pan on Peony. Then we have a palette that's going to show up quite a lot in this kind of video and in this part of the video, and that is my Rose Quartz palette from Huda Beauty. The pan that I have to talk about next is from my Pando's Eyeshadows, and that was the shade Cosmic Love right here. I have actually since rolled this one in as my level up level 5 palette, so I'm working on this one again currently. But I was working on the shade again Cosmic Love in my Pando's Eyeshadows, and that one took me 6 uses to pan on. It is quite a crumbly shade, and I also use this with more of a detailed brush, because I either use this one on my outer corner or as a liner, because it is a little bit of a deeper type of shimmer that I don't really necessarily love all over the lid. So not too many uses to pan on this shadow, but I did enjoy it, even though again it wasn't my typical type of shade. The third pan and the 27th pan of the year, so third pan of the quarter was 27th pan of the year, was one from my Panda palette in order, and this is the shadow that took me the absolute longest to pan on when it comes to uses, and that is this shade right here. So this is the shade Stinger from the Aha Honey palette, and you can see there is a tiny pan there in the middle. I'm trying to get through all of my Colourpop productive powder singles that are without pan this year and try to pan on them, and that's what I'm doing in my Panda palette in order. But this one I did of course work on this project, and it took me a whopping 42 uses to pan on, which is very high for me, and I will actually cover my average amount to use pan on shadow at the end. But yeah, that is how many times it took me to pan on this one. It was luckily a very good easy shade for me to reach for. I was able to incorporate this into a lot of looks, and I also worked on this one mainly during the summertime, like summer, end of summer I would say, which meant that I was doing a lot of warmer tones look anyway, so again it was very easy to incorporate that way. But 42 uses for this shadow. Next up we have a shadow from my Subculture palette, and when you look at this palette it's not going to look like the original Subculture, because it's actually a mix between the Subculture and the Jackie Aina palette. I took out my least favorite shades from this palette and moved over my favorite shades from the Jackie Aina palette to make this beautiful like autumnal type of palette. I absolutely love this one. It's like late summer, early autumn type of vibes, and it's so beautiful. I really love the curation I did with this palette, but I did actually end up rolling a shadow in here into my Pando's Eyeshadows, and I rolled that in for Pan Graveyard. So if you followed that product, this is a little bit of a spoiler, but I decided to roll in this shade right here, which is in the spot of Access. It is originally the shade Ginger. So when I moved that one over from the Jackie Aina palette, it actually did kind of crumble a little bit, so I had to repress the bits that crumbled, which ended up covering the pan. So I rolled this one in to try to hit pan on again, but I only had to reach for this one 3 times to hit pan on it. It was very, very fast, and I think that's because I already had a dip in it, and the shadow that I ended up kind of covering the pan with was very somewhat loosely pressed, but also very thin. So I do have that pan there, and I will try to maybe use it a little bit more before my next Pan Eyeshadows update, just to expand that pan, because again I didn't have to reach for it very much. I absolutely love this color though. It is a beautiful, beautiful warm brown, and again those 3 uses are not very accurate because I know that it took way longer to pan out in the first place, but re-hitting pan took 3 uses. Then, like I said, we are showing this palette here again, and I actually only have one more pan to talk about in this palette. I thought I had more, but so far I only have one more pan. But again, I will hit more pans in this one in the next quarter because I am working on it in my product level up. But the pan that I hit in that project, again a little bit of a spoiler if you're following my product level up, was actually the shade Lovestone right here, which is that kind of creamier type of shadow. It was a shadow that I wasn't necessarily originally gonna try to hit pan on, but I was using it to try to get my use out of it for the 5 goal that I have to do for all of the shadows in this palette. And I use this one as almost like a glitter glue for the shimmers on my lids, and I fell in love with it that way, so I kept using it and I managed to hit pan on it, and it took me 12 uses to hit pan on it that way, but I actually have continued reaching for it even after that point, just because I really did like using it as that type of glitter glue type of thing. So I think that's what I'm going to continue doing while I have this palette out. But yeah, that is the next pan, and that is pan number 29 for the year. Then we actually only have one more shadow to talk about. We have, what is that, the sixth pan for the quarter, so not very many pans, and again it is the last pan. But it is a very exciting pan. It is, yeah, super, super exciting. And you'll see in a second, but I knew this was coming soon, but I was still very thrilled when I hit pan on this one. It was yesterday, so actually the last day of the quarter, on the 30th of October. And the reason why it's so exciting is because it is my first ever Cleona pan. You can see there in the middle, this is one of their iridescent shades, so it's a little bit harder to see the pan, but you can definitely, I think, see it there in the center. This is the shade Glisten, which is one of their glitter iridescent multichromes, and the reason why I hit pan on this one is not just because it's my favorite. It's not my favorite. It's a beautiful kind of purple, like cool tone purple straight on going into pink to peach, and it's a really stunning shade, but it's not my absolute favorite. The reason why I hit pan on this one, I think, is because it's a very crumbly formula. The glitter iridescent shadows from Cleona are very, very crumbly, and you pick up a lot whenever you use it. So I think that's why I hit pan on this one specifically, but I have reached for this one a lot. However, majority of the times I've reached for this one was prior to me tracking all my uses, but I believe I had this one in my project 10 uses in my Armageddon project pan, if you followed that one a couple years ago. So I reached for it 10 times in that project for sure, and then I also reached for it a lot on my own, so I know that I have a lot of prior use to this. But in the last like year and a bit that I've tracked all my uses, I actually only have 3 uses tracked on this one. So yeah, I have 3 uses to hit pan on this one, but again, I know it took me way, way longer. I would assume that this one took me at least 25, if not more, to hit pan on. But yeah, very excited to have a pan in one of my Cleona shadows. It's a bit of a bittersweet moment, but some of these are getting older in my collection, so I'm glad that I'm getting used to them, and I can get over that, not fear, I wouldn't say fear, but like that kind of hindrance that I don't want to hit pan on my Cleona shadows because I want to preserve them, because now I have with basically organic use, which is ultimately my dream, and I can hopefully hit some more pan on my Cleona shadows moving forward. Alright, so those are again all of the shadows that I hit pan on in the last quarter, so not very many, so you can guess which area of this video I am most excited to talk about. But before we jump into that, I'm going to talk you through the average. So in the last quarter, the average uses to hit pan on a shadow was 14.33 uses, which is not my lowest quarter. In quarter 2, it took me 12.55 uses per shadow to hit pan, but it is quite on par with the overall average for the year, because total average, if I count all of the 30 eyeshadows that I hit pan on this year, the average uses per shadow to pan on it is 14.50, so 14.5 uses per shadow on average to pan. So again, the 14.33 uses this quarter is very equal to that average, which I'm happy to see, because I feel like that means that it's a pretty accurate estimation, I guess. So that is all of the pans that I hit. Let's move on to the eyeshadows that I finished. And let's talk quickly through earlier quarters. In quarter 1, I was able to finish 3 shadows, and in quarter 2, I didn't finish any shadows, which was a little bit of a shame. But I am happy again to say that I finished quite a few in quarter 3, so I'm going to talk you through those first. First up, we do have a shadow from my Pan palette. This one I did finish up earlier in the quarter. I can't remember if it was the first, I think it was the first month, so that would have been July. I did finish this one up, and that was this shade right here, which was a Colourpop pressed glitter, and this one was in the shade Prima Drama. You can see here on the back. It was the Potter, which is why it has like that label that I wrote on myself. But this one I worked on in my Pan palette, like I said, my BYOP. And it took me 28 uses to finish this one. It did have a little bit of use on it prior, but since it's a pressed glitter, they go much faster because the pigment size is so much larger than a regular eyeshadow. I did use this one on my eyes a couple times, but I prefer this one on my nails, so that's how I used it for the majority of the times. But yeah, this one is finished, and it's again the first eyeshadow that I finished in the quarter and the 4th one for the year. Then the next shadow that I finished also comes from my Pan palette, and the remaining 3 shadows I actually finished up very recently, like in the last, I would say, week or 2 out of the whole quarter. So I've had a really good few weeks when it comes to eyeshadows and finishing eyeshadows. But like I said, the next one comes from my Pan palette, and this one actually comes from my Soft Glam palette. If you haven't checked out my last couple of videos, like my Pan palette and my Pretty Pan, check those out first, because otherwise you will have spoilers in here. But the next shadow that I have to talk about comes again from my Soft Glam palette, and that was the shade Orange Soda, which has been empty for a while, but I did actually have a Franken shadow with some of this in it, which was here. And that one is now done, which means that I can count this shade as finished, because I don't have any more shadow like lingering from this one. And this one took me a lot of work to finish. I worked on this palette last year as my Pan palette, and this year as well, of course. This year I mainly used it as a Franken, just because I liked it a lot, Franken with Dusty Rose. But with everything, all of last year's usage, all of the Franken uses, everything tallied up, this one took me 156 uses to finish, so much higher than Prima Drama. But that makes sense. It's a matte, and it's quite like, it was quite firmly pressed, and it went rather slowly. But very happy to have that one done and another empty in this palette. Then the last shadow from one of my Pan palettes that I finished is this one right here. You can't see what it is, of course, more than it's like a single like here, but if I turn it around, you might be able to see there that this was the shade Bombawi from Glam Shop. So this one was in my BYOP Panda palette, so again another Panda palette shade, and I was able to finish this one up very recently. It was one of my goals for the month of September to finish this one, and I'm happy to say that I did do that. It did take me 74 uses to finish the shadow, so not as much as Orange Soda, of course, somewhere in between, and that also checks out. I had a lot of progress on this one before starting to tally it in this project, and majority of those uses came from my Pan palette this year. I did have a couple from last year, I believe, but not that many. And I believe I even had pad on it before rolling into my Pan palette, so again, it definitely take me longer than that to finish it fully, but tracked usage, that is how long it took. Then the last shadow that I have to talk about today is this one right here. If my camera will focus, there you go. So this here, as you can see, is an empty pan, and if I spin it around, you can see there that this is from Shine by SD. It is the shadow Tease, which was from the Sparkle Lights collection. This is a shadow that I had in my rolling project pan. I rolled this one in last update, so I only had it in for a month. And if you saw that project, this one was actually one that had very little product left in it, because it was shattered when it was transported to me. And I got this one sent from one of my subscribers, Kiora. She was declaring it from her collection, and unfortunately it did shatter in transit, but I saved what I could, and I was able to finish this one up in that project. So it only took me 7 uses to finish this eyeshadow, which is very low, but again, wasn't very much product in it, so it makes sense. But it would definitely bring down my average uses. But I'm happy to have another eyeshadow empty. And this is not an empty that I was expecting to have this year, but since I had so little product left, I thought it would be a nice one to roll out on my collection quite quickly. I know I can also get this one again, and they still have this one available, I believe. And I also am happy that I got to enjoy it and not just, you know, have it sit in my collection forever. So those were all of the eyeshadows that I was able to finish. We have 4 empties, which is very, very good. It's the best quarter, obviously, this year, and I think that's really fantastic. I'm hoping to keep that up in the next month and have even more empties in the last quarter of the year. I think I can do that, but we're just gonna have to see as I go. But looking at the average uses to finish the shadows in this quarter, the average use was quite low because of 2 reasons. I had obviously that Shine by SD shade, which brought it down quite a lot, and then also the pressed glitter also brought it down. So looking at that, the average quarter 3 to finish these shadows was 66.25 uses, and the average quarter 1 was 199.67 uses, so almost 200. And looking at that, taking that into consideration, the total average of uses to finish the eyeshadow so far this year is 123.43 uses, which I still think is pretty accurate if I, you know, look at both shimmers and mattes, and also shadows that have progress on them since before and shadows that don't. So yeah, that is kind of everything for this video. I'm very, very excited with where this is all sitting. I'm again hoping to have quite a few more eyeshadow empties before the end of the year, and with pans, I'm just gonna see what I hit. I'm not as focused on pans this year. I'm just trying to kind of spread my love throughout all of my eyeshadow collection, which is also why I have less pans than normal. But I hope you guys are having an amazing day wherever you are, and I will of course catch you in my next one. Bye guys!